Definition of satisfaction is the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs. The feminine loves pleasure. We run that through our body. We are the queens of pleasure. And this idea of fulfillment doesn't indicate an end goal or some sort of achievable benchmark that we need to get to. It's really holistic. It's very horizontal as opposed to vertical. And needs and wishes, I mean, every human needs their needs met. Also, have your wishes met means that you're truly manifesting your greatest potential in this life. So I thought, you know what, that's it. We're here to be satisfied women. We haven't had a good model or good training as to what femininity both is and also what it can be. And the other kind of flip side of this is that, this culture, it is the patriarchy. There's no way around it. We do live in the patriarchy. And while the patriarchy centers masculinity, it doesn't actually center it that well, and it doesn't even do masculinity justice. A distorted impression of what we think life should be, what we as humans should be, what masculinity is. It values very significantly femininity. And I pursued what I thought was a successful life on all accounts in terms of what the culture has told me. As a young girl, I'm sure listeners will resonate, part of the first generation who was told, you can be anything. And I thought, well, that's great news, because I definitely want to do and be anything. But then there's also that narrative of you need to do it all by yourself.
Yes.
And then we all have that training of success at all costs. Success in this very vertical, linear fashion where you're stepping over others. It's sometimes to the detriment of others. It's better if you do it yourself. We have a very DIY culture. We have an emphasis on the individual. And all of those things are very counter-feminine. 100%. Yeah, my goal is absolutely not to vilify anybody, and certainly not to vilify men. They grew up in this culture too, and it's not serving them either. They're not getting good messages or training on what true healthy masculinity is either. Now, a lot of them are doing the work. There are good men out there. I absolutely know that to be true. But unless we're questioning it, unless we're really doing the work of looking at this culture and how it doesn't serve any of us, we're falling prey to it, and we're continuing to repeat the narratives that keep us small, or that keep us hardened, or that keep us in our masculine when it's inauthentic. I know that the healthy masculine cherishes the feminine. I know that the feminine is strong as can be and can still be a go-getter and do things, but I want the feminine to do it in her own way.
Welcome to your journey to find true tranquility with the Tranquility Magazine podcast with your host, Jasmine Maya Royce. Today's episode featuring, you can find more information about Tranquility on our website, tranquilitymagazine.com.
Today, I'm very excited to have Alanna Kaivalya, who is a PhD student, also teacher, and a best-selling author and spiritual leader, and an expert on mythology, spirituality, and psychology. Her global network is far expansive, and she is a host of the Satisfied Woman's podcast. She earned a doctorate in mythological studies with an emphasis in psychology from the Pacifica Graduate Institute, and she is a former board member of the Carl Jung Foundation. Now, her new book is out, The Way of a Satisfied Woman, and I am so delighted to have you today. And my first question is always, what is your current mantra or state of mind?
I think right now, especially with the work that I'm doing, I'm every day considering how I can be more satisfied. And what can I do today to achieve greater satisfaction? And part of that is making sure that I am feeling fulfilled through the achievement of my wishes and needs. So that's what I'm working on.
It's a good idea to concept and wrap your head around when it's also a resonating term that you use in all your formats to kind of figure out what is a satisfied or what is feeling satisfied as a woman.
Absolutely. So I chose that word and that term and this phrase very consciously because we have such an emphasis on success in our culture. And there's a former book in men's work called The Way of the Superior Man.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, you know what? Men and the masculine, they love that kind of superior thing, that achieving thing, that success thing. That's definitely a masculine way to get life done. But what
Mm-hmm.
is the feminine way to do it? What is a satisfied woman's way to do it? And when I found the definition of satisfaction, my mind was blown. So the
Mm-hmm.
definition of satisfaction is the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs. The feminine loves pleasure. We run that through our body. We are the queens of pleasure. And this idea of fulfillment doesn't indicate an end goal or some sort of achievable benchmark that we need to get to. It's really holistic. It's very horizontal as opposed to vertical. And needs and wishes, I mean, every human needs their needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Also have your wishes met means that you're truly manifesting your greatest potential in this life. So I thought, you know what? That's it. We're here to be satisfied women.
I love it. I think the idea that I always think about is how words have power.
Yeah,
Words have meaning. The right word for the right subject or conversation can lead the direction for people to truly understand what the mission and the purpose is sometimes, but also making clarity and transparency on words that we haven't resonated with in a while. So for me, I was so excited about your book because it was just calling me that this is what I've been working on for a long time to figure out what my femininity is because I'm guilty, as you speak about in the beginning chapters. I have been a masculine entity for
yes,
most of my life, raised
yes.
a tomboy. I've been surrounded by, men friends and women friends too, but I have that directable leadership, confidence, and all those things that
Great
play
line.
a tricky role when it comes to other things. So, what kind of pursuit on your journey kind of led you to figure out working on your femininity and what was absent in our history as well as topically now that made you pursue this direction?
So it's something I've actually been studying for about 20 years or so and talking and teaching about for the last 15 in one way, shape, or another. I've always been fascinated about the polarity of masculinity and femininity. It really started with my studies in Eastern spirituality. There's a lot of work on masculinity and femininity in the Eastern spiritual, sort of yoga, Buddhist, that kind of arena. But I also have had a deep, long relationship with the study of psychology and particularly depth psychology, which also has this emphasis on the inner masculine and inner feminine, and the feminine and masculine as pieces of our psyche, that they are simply energies that exist within our psyche and they manifest themselves in certain ways within all of us. So all of us has feminine and masculine. But of course,
Hmm.
being a woman growing up in this culture, we are subject to what the culture indoctrinates us into, trains us for,
Mm.
teaches us, tells us about ourselves. And we haven't had a good model or good training as to what femininity both is and also what it can be. And the other kind of flip side of this is that, this culture, it is the patriarchy. There's no way around it. We do live in the patriarchy. And while the patriarchy centers masculinity, it doesn't actually center it that well, and it doesn't even do masculinity justice. So
Mm.
the distorted impression of what we think life should be, what we as humans should be, what masculinity is. It
Mm.
devalues very significantly femininity. And I pursued what I thought was a successful life. On all accounts, in terms of what the culture has told me, as a
Mhm.
young girl, I'm sure listeners will resonate with this. As a young girl, I was, I think, part of the first generation who was told, you can do anything, you can
Mhm.
be anything. And I thought, well, that's great news because I definitely want to do and be anything. But then there's also that narrative of you need to do it all by yourself.
Yes.
And then we all have that training of success at all costs. Success in this very vertical, linear fashion where you're stepping over others. It's sometimes to the detriment of others. It's better if you do it yourself. We have a very DIY culture. We have an emphasis on the individual. And
Mm.
all of those things are very counter feminine.
Mm.
So here I was, a young girl and then a young woman, and falling prey to the just general cultural narrative, for better or for worse, achieving success at all cost, running my own business,
Mm-hmm.
believing the concept that actually I can do this all myself and I don't need a man. And then here I am, 20 years into this pursuit, achieving success by all external benchmarks, well, achieving it really well. And boy, was I unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, was I unhappy. And I think that my study of masculinity and femininity through this time started to give me insight as to the nature of that unhappiness and how I could actually fix it. And it's not something that we're talking about a lot. It's not something that we're bringing forward. Yes, we're asking for equality for women, but we're
Mm-hmm.
still asking to be equal on men's terms,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
our terms.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote the book and pursued more research and figuring out what are our terms? What do we need?
It's such really of what we need to kind of reconsider,
Mm.
redevelop our awareness, rewire our synapses to, all the women in my life that have inspired me are go-getters, leaders, innovators, were daring to put themselves forward in positions, careers, establishments to fall into line, to be notable or acknowledged as being just smart, intuitive, creative, inventive, all those things, but also being a woman inside those contexts. But they were fulfilling in the masculine society
Yeah.
that, those are the guiding templates that I'm working on myself. And then I have to flow with that to make sure that I can make a presence in that zone because it is a tricky dance to figure out what is my needs or wants and what is my consideration and what I need to look at when it's outside of work to inside of anything else. So going back to when you're pursuing the idea, you talked about a lot of historical factors, the suffragettes, and also I was thinking in my mind, but eventually you said like the yin and yang.
Yeah.
And we're not detrimenting men because I think there's a deep pain right now, and
Sure.
that transpires for both and every human out there to find the duality to get our shift back into order
Yeah.
that everyone feels acknowledged and appreciated.
100%. Yeah, my goal is absolutely not to vilify anybody and certainly not to vilify men. They grew up in this culture too, and it's not serving them either. They're
Mm,
not getting good messages or training on what true healthy masculinity is either. Now, a lot of them are doing the work. There are good men out there. I absolutely know that to be true. But unless we're questioning it, unless we're really doing the work of looking at this culture and how it doesn't serve any of us,
mm,
then we're falling prey to it and we're continuing to repeat the narratives that keep us small or that keep us
mm,
hardened or that keep us in our masculine when it's inauthentic. So,
mm,
I really want all of us to question what it is. And I know that the healthy masculine cherishes the feminine. I know that the feminine is strong as can be and can still be a go-getter and do things, but I want the feminine to do it in her own way.
mm,
I want us to be in the boardrooms having collaboration and communication and ideas and not being faulted for it as being weak because we're not being decisive.
mm.
I want women to own businesses that support the community and not being faulted for it because they're not increasing their profit margin, having success at all costs to the detriment of others. I want them to be celebrated for injecting the community with their profit margin instead, because that's what women
Yeah.
do. I want women to make choices based on what their needs are, and whether that choice is to have a family first and then a career, give them that opportunity as opposed to that narrative that as soon as you exit whatever your educational training is, clearly you're going to go to the career path.
Mhm,
We have different needs and we have different ways of doing things. We can still do everything.
mhm.
I just want us to do it in our own way.
Yeah, finding your own path is very definitive, and I've been guilty of being a sort of lone wolf. And I'm realizing, men have tribes and collaborates, and I'm good at that too, like having a group. And I realize, when I step back from my career pursuits, I'm like, I was not in when another woman came on the scene, I want to advocate you. I want you to be supported. I want you to feel connected to our group or community, our everybody that's working with us to make sure that you don't feel isolated and alone. And that has
Yeah.
changed dramatically in the last, couple years. And it's everyone transparency, trying to include people more than we're stepping over them in a competition factor. Because
Right. Yeah.
for a long time in the 80s, it was, oh, another lady's here. Oh, I have to, I have to be solo. I have to do my own thing. And then the 90s was progressive. And then it kind of grew into now more of a collaboration that you have support from other women in your career to advocate and support you.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of another trick of the patriarchy is this individuality idea that we
Mm,
are to do it ourselves, we are to do it alone, we are to, isolate ourselves from others. And, as we know, that kind of isolation and individuality narrative is
mm,
one way to maintain control. And
mm,
it's particularly effective for the feminine woman because not only does it isolate us just from everybody, it isolates us from each other. And it
yeah.
teaches us that we're in competition with each other. It gives us a
Hmm.
lack mindset that we have to compete with other women for men. We have to compete with
Hmm.
other women for jobs. We have to compete with other women for anything. We have this scarcity mindset. And it also contributes to this idea that we have that our only value is based on giving ourselves away, that
Mm.
we have to do everything for everyone at all times, at all costs, and continuously just divest ourselves of our own needs because that's
Mhm.
the only way we'll be loved, we'll be hired, and we'll be
Hmm.
accepted.
Yeah, it's a very tricky dance as you turn, like in discussing tango as being a feminine
Yeah.
idea of exposure and vulnerability, but also to understand a lot of topics you kind of touched upon. And this is what I've been working on. I am great at my emotions. I can feel the entire spectrum, which I
Yeah.
have like stifled down for a long time
Right.
because I was highly empathetic, highly emotional, and I couldn't process them. I got great at compartmentalization. I was like, oh, I'm work mode. Like we are linear mindset, not circular woman. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, we're on a direction. I'm going to achieve the direction. I'm not going to get emotional until I'm done. I'm going to hide in the corner and have my
Uh-huh.
breakdown. But all those emotions and intuition, all those, can you speak a little bit about some key things about evolving into your feminine or finding it again?
Yeah, I mean, again, I want us to give ourselves all some grace because we have had so much lifetime, so much culture, so much training in
Mm,
being this one way. And so I want us to all recognize that part of being a feminine woman is that we have intuition and we have emotions. It's not something you have to go out and find or go out and get. It's something that I want us to center more. And that can be scary because the historical narrative has been that emotions in a woman signify
mm,
that she's crazy. And we need to favor logic and rational thinking over those emotions because those emotions, they're not giving you correct information.
mm.
Intuition in a woman has previously been labeled witchy.
Yeah. Woohoo.
And we were burned at the stake for that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's no wonder that women themselves try to repress and dismiss
Mm.
intuition and emotions, right? It's no wonder
Yeah.
because boy, can that be scary and boy, can that actually result in harm. I watched a TV show recently that I loved, honestly. It was called George and Tammy about Tammy Wynette and George Jones. They were country singers.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And Tammy's first marriage in her early 20s, she realized that her husband was not her guy and she wanted to divorce him. And this was in probably the early 50s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that a
Ooh,
woman
big.
would want to divorce her husband was so outrageous that she was diagnosed with a mental health disorder, sent to a psychiatric facility, and undergone electroshock therapy simply
Yeah.
for wanting a divorce. Like
Mm-hmm.
when women's ideas or their emotions or what they're feeling goes against the patriarchal grain, we
Mm-hmm.
we unfortunately have suffered a lot of damage for that. So let's just give ourselves some grace and understand the fear and understand the reasons why we've kind of tried to shove that under the rug. But let's
Yeah.
reclaim the power of that, because that's what gives us balance in this
Mhm.
time, in this place, in our lives. Emotions are not logic and reason, and they are just as valid. Intuition is not logical and sometimes not reasonable, but it is just as valid. And emotions and intuition come from a deeper place in us. They come from our unconscious.
Mhm.
And that wisdom is so profound that sometimes we don't understand the reason behind it
Mhm.
until we actually act upon it.
Yeah, it's smart to kind of get in touch with self and understand how you're doing. Like I do my meditation to kind of have a checkpoint, figuring out what my body is telling me, what I need, how to decompress, how to let things go that are other people's things or other people's emotions. That where are mine now today? We all have like a cycle, and women have a cycle, and every week is a different emotion, a different connection, and a different understanding of who we're going to be. Especially
Yeah.
me being a Gemini, I'm multiple people. Which one do you need today?
At least two of you at all times.
Yeah, exactly. So there's
Yeah.
always a counterpoint to like step in to charge. But in that, it's also understanding where your emotions are. And you touched on a very poignant point that I want you to dig into the element of that vulnerability going in to share those aspects of you and how you're actually doing are terrifying and scary.
Yeah.
And those moments when you are in a situation that you need to express how you're feeling
Yeah.
with a counterpart or someone else, when you're pulling the masculinity forward, there's elements you touched upon that are important for them to also understand when a woman is expressing those things.
Yeah, so in the book, I outline four keys to satisfaction, and I fully recognize that we are living in a world that is very much changing,
Mm,
but it's not
yeah,
changed, right? It's not
true.
changed. So we're still coming up against places, spaces, people, relationships, things that may not be willing to go here with us, which is why
Yes.
there's so much work that needs to be done on our part to make sure that when we engage with places, spaces, people, things, that we kind of curate it so that
Hmm.
they can support us in being satisfied women. And part of that support is making sure that we always have these four keys established. And first off is safety, safe to
Hmm.
be who we are and free from harm in body, mind, and heart. Security, which is to have all of our basic needs met in all the ways that we need them. Trust in both ourselves, meaning really our intuition and our emotional depth, and also in others and those around
Yeah.
us. We want to have trustworthy people. And then the ability to be cherished by the masculine. So, on an internal landscape, for us as feminine women, that's having our own internal masculine energy really serve our femininity and be guided by our intuition and emotions as opposed to leading with our masculinity and moving from our logic and reason. But when we have masculine counterparts, whether that be in our family and intimate relationships and colleagues, we're going to ask them to cherish us. We're going to allow ourselves to be cherished. There is kind of a dynamic dance between masculine and feminine in that act. And the masculine cherishes the feminine when he never leaves her alone in her pain until
Mm.
a solution is reached.
Wow. I mean, I'm impressed. I was like, well, and you get to that point, it's also I've been in long-term relationships myself, and it's just not probably not the right person for me, at the different trials and errors.
Yeah.
And that's what was missing in one of my former relationships was the idea of that deep interaction. That's our a feminine's view or my interpretation of a feminine's view on being vulnerable to share what I'm feeling and then have expectations that you will meet me in the middle. Listen, fine. That's good if a man can listen, but also kind of digging deeper to expose some of their weaknesses, not like they have to be that guarded nature that they have. That's a general statement, but you've been raised to not show, certain emotions and certain
Boys don't cry, Jasmine.
I know, right? It's been
Right?
in
They're saddled with that narrative, and that's
Yeah,
not fair.
it's not. And so it's evolving in a way that most people are doing their work and understanding their self and what they need or want. And that exposure of vulnerability, especially when it comes to childhood development and how you're raised and how that portrays itself in your society and your life now, is a very key point to kind of recognize. But when you talked about before the idea about being cherished, I'm like, whew, like I'm
Doesn't it feel like a weight lifts when you hear that?
it's exciting but terrifying for me. Okay, I think I wanted to respect too hard. That makes me way more masculine because I
Okay.
wanted some respect and appreciation.
Um,
And I'm like, ooh, that's dangerous.
So, right. So you're alluding to the question essentially that in the intimate partnership, one of the things I help people with in my book and my work is making sure that they know which primary polarity is theirs,
Hmm.
right? Because we all have both, but naturally we as humans will generally lean toward one or feel more comfort in one over the other.
Yeah.
And it's nothing more than intimate partnership that will give us the opportunity to really settle into that polarity that allows us to shine.
Yeah.
So, in order to find out which polarity is your primary one, you
Hmm.
want to ask yourself the question in intimate partnership, would you prefer to
Hmm.
be respected or to be cherished?
Hmm.
Now, I know that we all want both. I get it.
Yes.
But to get to which polarity is your primary one, you need to answer the question. And to be respected means that all of your decisions and guidance,
Hmm.
when it's in the highest interest of the relationship and everybody, all your decisions and guidance are respected and followed. And to
Hmm.
be cherished means and that you're allowed to have this emotional depth and your emotional experience, and that it will always be heeded, attended to. The masculine will be present for it, and you'll never be left alone with it.
Hmm.
Because the masculine's great at finding solutions, and the feminine is great at feeling whether those solutions are going to work or not.
Yes.
Okay.
With your, go ahead.
So it's a partnership. And yeah, we can do it internally, but if we
Hmm.
have to do it internally in perpetuity, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of outsourcing.
Hmm.
So as much as I like making decisions, as much as I enjoy being the leader, as much as I'm capable of handling my shit, providing my own security, providing my own safety, all that stuff, boy, am I tired. And I don't have to. I don't
Hmm.
have to. In intimate relationship, what you want is someone to be a complement and effectively to share the load. So in intimate relationship, can we, as women who are overly trained to wear the mask of the masculine, to do all things for
Hmm.
ourselves, can we just relax and trust the person we've chosen to be the partner who can lead, who can guide, who can solve, and we get
Hmm.
to receive, we get to feel, we get to intuit, we get to create,
Yeah.
we get to move, breathe, be loud, be wild, be free. We get to question,
Hmm.
not too much because that's nagging. You get to inquire,
Hmm.
right? So these healthy qualities of each polarity, they are designed to work together and be the word is simpatico.
Simpatico.
Yeah. We got to find the right person for that.
Yes. And that is a interesting dance in the current climates. And
Yeah.
also wherever base is LA. And it's like, and that trust factor, it's because I've done a lot of work about, understanding the masculinity and their needs and wants and how to kind of shine brighter in my feminine in a safe environment,
Yeah.
not in like a work format. I was keep my stuff pretty masculine there, but like when it comes to intimacy, allowing myself to be more vulnerable, exposed, emotional, intuition. It's funny when I was reading your book, all I thought about was a book that I loved and read all of her books because you did study mythology. It's like the Myths of Avalon.
Oh yeah, I love the Mists of Avalon. Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
It's one of
Talk
my
about it.
favorite.
Talk about
Huh?
a template for strong, powerful, intuitive, witchy, emotional women who are really running the show.
Hmm. So when I was
Oh,
reading your book the whole time, because she has this moment, can't remember the characters because I read these when I moved to London and they were they directed me to London. I ended up moving when I was
Oh,
in
wow.
midway for the Mists of Avalon, and I was like,
Oh
okay,
my
we're moving.
gosh, that's wonderful.
And so in that, I went through all of her books when I was there
Yeah.
because it had a calling that I loved, that strong femininity and the powerful women that would directing behind the scenes and they were making decisions. There was one point where your book resonated with a chapter in hers about a woman was sitting by a fireplace, had deep intuition about where her husband is at the time when he was at battle or war, and they were having a conversation
Mhm.
while he wasn't even there, and she already knew that he's going to pass because of this. And it's just, oh, yeah, that deep intuition. We used to know it, or we would guide our energy by it, or, the same would be transparent as a woman that has kids. You can feel when they're in trouble, that when something's going on, or you need to call them. And I'm good at my other women friends, no matter where they live. I can say, like, I need to call that person, and they'll call me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. There's something that is truly unexplainable. And that's okay, and the unfortunate thing about not just, I mean, this isn't just the patriarchy either. This is the, post-industrial revolution,
Mm,
is that we've really released and decredited spirituality,
yeah,
mythology, inner knowing. Any of that kind of inner wisdom has fallen by the wayside in favor of logic and science and reason and facts.
yeah,
And all of those things are good and true, but they're truly only one side of the coin because all of us as humans know things that we can't
mm,
put on paper, right? We all
yeah,
feel love, but I can't cut you open and locate the source of love, right? I
uh-huh,
can't cut you open and understand what creates sadness. There are just things about being human that
hmm,
we will never fully understand or figure out. And all of those things are the domain of the feminine. So to
yeah,
discredit those and to no longer see them as valuable, I mean, it's part of the devaluation of femininity.
yeah. It's impressive, and it comes to mind this letter that I read from Einstein to his daughter about the most powerful force in the universe, and that's love.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we're missing a lot in our current state of appreciating. And you were talking about before, like a woman being a feminine inside of a relationship.
Mhm.
And you can be inquisitive, you can ask questions, but also I would say be appreciative and thankful and grateful for what they're doing, especially if you like what they're doing, because it starts to ingrain them what you need and want better, to inform them that you are appreciating their gestures.
100%. And one of the great qualities of femininity is receptivity.
Yeah.
Right? To open ourselves up and receive. I mean, if we think about it in the most basic format as feminine women, think about how intercourse works. We are literally the receptacle. We
Yeah.
are to receive the generosity, hopefully, but quite literally the penetration of the masculine. That's just sort of birds and bees stuff.
Hmm.
But psychologically, we also have that same energy that we are here to receive the generosity of the
Hmm.
masculine. And when we find the masculine who desires to be generous with us, the
Yeah.
more we receive that generosity, the more they want to offer it. And that's
Hmm.
not just financial. That's doing little things for us. That's giving their love. That's giving support. That's giving emotional stability. That's being there with their presence for us. There are so many ways to be
Mm.
generous with the feminine. And trust me, we appreciate all of it.
Yeah. It's really important to kind of rework as a feminine and a woman myself, and also what I've seen out right now, and my friends included, wonderful people, and just moments where I'm not in a relationship and I've gone the dating course. I did so much masculine things. I was like, I'll plan the date. I'm really good at this. And also I have ideas. And I'm like, don't do that.
Don't
I'm
do
taking
that.
away. And that's not
Actually,
important.
I have a new course that I've just launched called From
Oh,
Self to Soulmate,
okay.
Attracting the Love You Deserve, that talks exactly about this because
Mm,
inevitably women like you and I who have grown up in this time and place, we are used to doing everything and
mm-hmm.
really wearing the mask of the masculine. And showing up for the world in that way because that's what we were taught was the right way to do it. That's what's made us safe. That's what's made us successful. But if you are a feminine woman under there somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and if what you want is to attract a masculine man, you will
Yeah.
not do it with
Yes.
masculine behavior. It's just the law of the universe. If you think about magnets, magnets
Yeah.
have to be in opposition in order to attract. You are
Mm-hmm.
not, think of the kind of person you're attracting if you're in your masculine.
Oh, not more feminine.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
feminine. And there's nothing wrong with it being in the music industry where duality is very transparent for a time that
100%.
men.
Fine. And if that's your natural polarity, absolutely, I want that for you. But if it's not your natural polarity, then I definitely want you to do something different.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would agree with that because I've learned by as a testing course about, getting back in the market and trying to figure it out. And I've been on the market for some time right now, but I take steps back that I enjoy what I do. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll go there. That's the thing. What I was attracting is resonating with me stepping into the masculine, not really
Yeah.
wanting to be in the masculine. Then I
Right.
was, oh, took me to a date, went out, we went to the restaurant, it's closed. Did you check? I'm letting you lead. And then it's closed. It's like, okay, well, I'll fix this right now. We'll go over there. Or, I resolve the situation by problem solving, which is, I
No,
could, yeah, no.
no, 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 no. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you is do not help them. Do
Yes.
not help them. You're going to want to. It's going to be like a burning fire in your soul. Like, I know how to fix this. I can fix this so easily and quickly. And we all know you can.
I
We
know.
all know how capable you are. But if you want that relationship, do not fix the problem.
I know. It requires patience. And because I also understand that I have a cornucopia of men friends that I think they're amazing people. And I look at them sometimes looking wounded child. And I am a wounded child. That
We
doesn't
all are.
mean, yeah, we all are wounded children and looking for that safety, the security for them too, but that power of love and affection that they're requiring is something that women now we need to kind of filter back into or exchange for what we do outside is not what you do in a relationship.
And again, we have to just give everybody some grace, right?
Mhm.
All of us, I like to think of it as just improper training. It's
Yes.
just improper training. We've done our best with what we've been given, but nobody pulled us aside as young people and said, all right, here are the basic energies of the universe. We're not sure how it's going to shake out for you, but no matter how it shakes out for you, this is how femininity works. This is how masculinity works. These are how the two work together. There's no like role playing. Nobody's required at the age of 25 when the prefrontal cortex is developed to
Mhm.
suddenly enter therapy and solve their childhood wounds. We're all just walking around wounded and bumping into each other, probably badly. So I
Mm.
think a little bit of grace is okay. And, I don't advocate any of us to try to be Miss Perfect or look for Mr. Perfect. Nobody's
Yeah,
perfect. And if you
true.
can find someone who's got enough love,
Hmm.
that's important, and enough willingness to go on the journey of healing, of recentering their polarity, of working on making sure they have the best expression of those energies. We're going to F it up sometimes. I mean,
Yeah.
as the feminine women, we're also going to F it up sometimes. We're going
Oh yeah.
we're going to go too far into that inquiry and start nagging, you
Yeah.
know, or we're going to put back on what's comfortable, which is the masculine mask, and start manhandling,
Oh yeah.
right? Which emasculates our partner.
Hmm.
So it's just going to be some time and practice and willingness to give each other grace and maybe even being playful about pointing out, like, are you manning up right now?
Yeah.
I feel like you might be manning up right now, like, and kind of take that back a notch.
Yeah, because there's two things that I debate all the time in a transparency of getting to know someone. And there's one that I have been guilty about too early, giving too many compliments that don't need to be received
Okay.
early on. And then I'm tricky with my jokes. Like I'm a funny, humorous person in general. And I also found out that, when you're in a relationship that I've been there before in like long-term relationships, and I'm like, oh, that's a wound. That's a sore spot. My sarcasm did not hit there well.
Mhm.
And I know that also for me. Ooh, that's a bad joke. Let's not do that anymore.
Right.
awareness would be needed to be transparent enough to, oh yeah, I was like, that kind of was too far on the sarcasm to meanness.
Yeah.
Those things, how have you explored ways for women to either flow with them or use them or the
Well, I
idea?
mean, I don't really recommend that anybody compromise themselves, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. Like if something that you say lands in a way that is harmful.
Yeah.
One of the things I heard once that I thought was really clever is like when you know someone's triggers, don't pull them, right? I
Wise
mean,
words.
if you think about a trigger on a gun, like it's there,
Mhm.
it always exists. But boy,
Yes.
you don't have to pull the trigger.
Hmm.
So I think part of love and intimacy, I know that part of love and intimacy is understanding your partner's core wounds,
Hmm.
understanding what it is that is alive for them in their psyche, and you'll know what's alive for them and what's important on the inside based on what they get disproportionately emotional over.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, if they're pissed, the meter ran out and they now have a ticket on their car, like that, anybody would be pissed. That's reasonable. That is an
Hmm.
appropriate emotional reaction to an event. But
Hmm.
if it's, you left the socks on the floor one more time and now it's a 3 to 4 hour knockdown, drag out argument,
Yeah.
that's disproportionate. And that's going to clue you into, okay, well, this is something that this person is dealing with on the inside. And
Hmm.
I think what's most helpful for both parties, even in those cases, is to actually stay in the polarity and to
Interesting.
actually stay in the polarity of their choosing because there is a dialogue that can happen back and forth,
Hmm.
right? So if the feminine is feeling that emotion, the masculine can have the presence. And masculine presence is so calming and steady for the feminine
Hmm.
that when the feminine is having an emotional response, when the masculine offers that presence and that steadiness and just says, baby, like, tell me what's going on. And like,
Yeah.
doesn't, and it's like a mooring post, right?
Hmm.
I'm a sailor. So
Yeah, I understand.
when you hitch to a mooring ball,
Hmm.
yeah, it doesn't matter what the ocean's doing.
You have stability.
You're stable.
Hmm.
So the masculine can offer that stability for the feminine to kind of whirl around a bit, find her place and say, look, here's what I'm feeling, and stay with the feeling, right?
Yeah.
That's what the feminine is, stay with the feeling. And then the masculine's gift is problem solving. So
Hmm.
allowing them to offer you solutions. Now, sometimes that will flip. If
Hmm.
it's the masculine that suddenly goes into this emotional space, what he's accessing is his inner feminine.
Yeah.
And so what we will need to do is for a time get into our masculine, hold that steady
Hmm.
space and say, baby, tell me what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And be that steady mooring post. However, once our masculine partner has gotten over the emotional stuff,
Hmm.
they need to go back to their
Yeah.
masculine polarity. If we continuously stay in our masculine and we show them how capable we are of being that for them, we'll turn into their mothers.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. So there needs, if we ever flip, like whoever's having their emotional thing, like they're in the
Uh-huh.
feminine, masculine shows up. But if it's the masculine partner who's doing it, they have to pick the masculinity back up.
Yes.
You've got to downshift. You got to go back into the feminine. You got to let them pick the masculine back up because otherwise you end up being their mom.
Yeah, I mean, I would be highly nervous to step into that position and not get back out for me. And I understand because what you're speaking about before is the argument that happens or blooms, and then I call it projection. This is not about me. This is about your issues, but I seem to be the point of contact for this. So I'm just going to sit here and kind of maneuver it and figure out what it
Yeah.
is and get to the root. And but how do I not put my foot in it to escalate it anymore?
That's
Or,
sick. That's
yeah,
why
to
that's
like,
why we need to have an agreement in partnership that we're both here for personal growth. Look, we don't need relationship, marriage, the whole thing like we did 50 years ago as women. Okay, 50 years ago,
true.
we couldn't open our own bank accounts. We had
Uh-huh.
to have a man to do it. We couldn't have our own mortgage. We had to have a man to
Hmm.
do it. There were clubs and social things that we couldn't even enter
Yeah.
without a man. So relationship was required for women
Hmm.
to be in the world. That's not the case
Yeah.
anymore. We have our own money. We have our own jobs. We can take care of ourselves. We've all proved that what we need relationship for
Mhm.
is personal growth, spiritual development, emotional security, down regulation, the actual physical health benefits. You know that people live longer when they're in intimate partnership, particularly men?
I knew that for men.
Did you know that stress is greatly reduced and regulatory, like your nervous system's ability to regulate is improved when you're in a healthy intimate partnership?
It makes sense. Just
Yeah.
that intimacy, that dialogue, the companionship, going the course of your own journey together with someone else.
But
You'll,
it's also science. Like,
ah,
we are actually, our bodies, our minds, we're designed for partnership. This is
mhm.
how the human race evolved. We
Yeah.
were never designed to be alone. So intimate partnership is not just better for us physically. It's also the only way we're going to achieve true personal individual growth. So if
Yes.
you've got a partner who's committed to that with you, that's what relationship today can do for us. Because it's not
Mhm.
going to buy us a house. We can do that. It's not
Yeah.
going to necessarily earn us money. We can do that.
Mhm.
Right? So what we're asking for is something much bigger and much more profound. So when we have that agreement with someone, what we need to understand is that even though there's those great health benefits,
Yes.
nothing,
Mhm.
nothing like intimate partnership is going to push your triggers.
Oh, yes.
Because
Mhm.
we are broken in relationship, our early relationship in early childhood with our parents
Mhm.
or caregivers, and we are healed in relationship. And I don't mean to be cliche, but it just is the case that
Mhm.
as adults, we will reenact our early wounds in order to resolve them.
Yep,
And if
guilty.
we, oh, me too, girl, all day long. And if we have
Oh.
the right partner who can hold that space and work with us,
Mm.
I mean, this is probably one of the greatest gifts we can ever have in our lifetimes.
It is true. I have understood, and even scientifically, emotionally, the deeper connection that you're guiding for and looking for. And then I've gotten expectations. You mentioned very dangerous word.
Expectations are premeditated disappointments.
Oh, good phrase. I like that. So that's the idea that I'm like, okay, don't have any expectations on what they're going to do, say, or act like. Don't do them for yourself. Don't progress. Just enjoy the ride and do the experience. And then make sure that for me, stand up as who I am, what I am, and all of what I'm going to offer from the starting point. I'm not really gonna, I have done it where I sacrifice myself, my career, my motivations for a man before just because I wanted them to be equal playing fields. I could feel the inadequacy that they didn't feel worthy or enough, and then I demuted and diminished my light in order to get them to a better place. And then it was a bad decision for me.
I get it. You're not alone. You are
Uh,
not.
But it also comes with learning and growth and knowing my self-worth and knowing my understanding that you're a grown man. I appreciate you. I applaud your journey. Your decision makes sense for you. You do your decision and, letting them have their own clear direction that I'm not picking up the pieces to put your house back together. I mean that as a metaphorical, you
Sure.
know, element.
Yeah, that's codependency.
Yes, I've dealt with that. Okay. I was like, yeah, I had my first relationship was that.
Really, I think about 95% of all relationships are that. It's just a trap that we fall into. I think it's part of being human. It really is. And
Yeah.
you're in codependency in any relationship, family, friends, colleagues, intimate partners, when you effectively see their inner light as being off,
Yeah.
right? When you see them as disempowered. So
Mm.
if you're playing one of three roles, you're in codependency. If you're trying to save them,
Hmm.
that's because they need you to save them, that's the thinking,
Mm. Yeah.
codependency. If you feel victimized by them,
Hmm.
codependency. And if you are persecuting them, blaming them for doing things, telling them they're doing wrong, also codependency. And codependency, you can switch between all three of
Yeah.
those roles. You don't have to
The
stay in one.
first two I resonate with for my first relationship. I was only 23, child. So like in my mind, still a child. The brain has not developed fully. And I wasn't raised in a family that was codependent at all, but my partner was. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a lot. But I felt very responsible for him and all his needs because he was just trying to figure out what he was doing with anything. And I had more experience being an adult.
Well, and also so much cultural training as a woman to provide for all the needs of everyone else at all times
Yeah.
and at all costs. I mean, I don't know a woman who hasn't been trained that way.
True. Yeah, it's probably in my parentage in that way, very 50s in certain ways of viewing it, where woman stays at home, men goes out to provide, things like that. I have been instilled with, but also demuted my light, but I got from both of them more understanding of my independence and my pursuits in my own way. So it's always your upbringing and how it transpires to do all the testing courses in a relationship. You're like, okay, let's do this
Absolutely.
again.
It is, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, it's part of our journey, it's part of being human, it's part of self-discovery, and I don't think there's anything more precious than the opportunity to move through those challenges with a loving partner.
Yeah, it's also tricky now to figure out the dating apps and all those things in LA. And we're all known to be, I believe LA can be a lonely city for many. Big cities are like that. I'm lucky that I have great friends and great connections, but it can be harder for a lot of people to trust what we say on an application that is transparent enough to be truthful when reality hits. You're like, oh, okay, that's not
Yeah.
really what
I don't trust the apps.
me neither.
I'm
Um,
gonna be honest with you. Like, I don't, it's
uh,
very difficult in this day and age because how else are we gonna meet people
mm,
post-pandemic in this digital world where everybody's so used to social media? So it's probably a necessary evil and here to stay. However, I think that some of the problems that are infused in the culture are very much highlighted through the
yeah.
apps.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of psychological elements about it. For me, it's like I'm having a good day. I'm just gonna look at it, and I was like, oh, I feel lesser. It's like I feel like I went to a toxic relationship that I didn't sign up for.
Yeah.
And it's not saying
Yeah.
that there is not wonderful people out there, but applications have kind of ruined what we were raised doing dating and meeting people in public. And at certain ages, it's very different. Have a ring, not a ring. Are you available? Are you not available? Do you have kids? What's your thing? At least you get a stat sheet, but no, it's not always the truthful stat sheet
Well,
sometimes.
they also, apps don't, you know, we as humans come with certain biological imperatives and certain psychological structures and evolutionary lessons that are ingrained that help us to meet someone, and none of those are engaged on an app. I mean, literally
Yeah.
just the act of being able to smell somebody
Oh,
will
yeah,
clue
chemistry.
you to whether this person is dateable or not.
Mm-hmm.
The way that their face looks and your ability to empathically connect with them, you don't get that on an app. So there are some real biological imperatives that are just frankly overridden through an app. So it is no wonder, it is no
Mm-hmm.
wonder that when we go on an app and then we show up to meet someone that it doesn't feel like the person we found on the app, you know, like there's
Yeah.
a big incongruency there.
I mean, it's always be open, be available, and trust your chorus. I was when you said that, I was like, maybe I need to create an app that's scratch and sniff. You don't need to see anything. You just have to like their chemistry or not, and then figure out if you want to meet them.
Well,
Very
I will be your first investor in that app. Let's do
nice.
this.
So tell everyone again about your class that you're going to put forward about this topic that we were discussing about relationships or connection.
Absolutely, because I recognize what a sticky, big challenge it is for modern day women, but also how important it is for us as women and just humans to be able to find the right partner. So I'm trying to offer the kind of training, insights, practical advice, structure that we need in order to actually magnetize and attract the partner that will be our soulmate. And I don't use that term lightly. To me, I use it in a psychological way that soul is our unconscious, the person who's going to unlock for us that deep feminine core so that we can be most fully ourselves. So I've developed this course from self to soulmate,
Oh, I love it.
attracting the love that you deserve. And it's out and ready to go. If you go to my website, thesatisfiedwoman.com, there's a link to a free master class on there that will give you some tidbits and tips from the course that will lead ease you into it. Also, the course is
Mhm.
on there. And then for podcast listeners, I have a special page, thesatisfiedwoman.com/empower me, where
Mm.
I will give you a free chapter. It's my favorite chapter from my book, The Way of the Satisfied Woman. It's chapter number 3, Permission to Disrupt, as well as
Ooh.
a couple of other free goodies. So that's all on my website. I have an app that you can download where you can join a community of women who are all discussing ways to become more satisfied in their life. I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to do my best work to bring women together and to give them the tools and the structure to be more satisfied, but also to be in conversation with each other about
Yeah.
what satisfaction means for all of us right now.
Amazing. So I'm excited about that. I will join up myself. Obviously, I need
Oh,
it.
thank you, thank you. I'd look
Uh,
forward to having you.
Thank you. So my last two questions are always first, what is the best advice you've ever received?
I've received a lot of good advice. I had a couple flash through my head. One was my professor in grad school as I was beginning my dissertation. He said, "I'm going to give you one piece of advice." And he looked at me and I was ready for it. I was like, "Oh my God, what's he going to say?" He goes,
Mhm.
"Finish." As
Wow.
in finish the dissertation. So many people
Yeah.
start and then they don't finish. That was an outstanding piece of advice. But I have to mention one from my grandmother because my grandmother was my probably one of my most beloved humans, and I talk about her in
Mm.
my book a lot. And at 10 years old, I really didn't have any kind of religious upbringing at all. And she pulled me aside. I had asked about an image that was in her home. She had some religion, but we didn't go to church or anywhere.
Mhm.
She said, Alanna, God lives in your heart.
Mm,
And I think
beautiful.
she set me on the path to becoming a mystic and a person who looks inside for wisdom. That was pretty precious. So those are two good pieces of advice.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know, especially for your grandmother, like what course they've already kind of pre-designed you to do just because their inner wisdom kind of puts you on that path and a beautiful thing to impart and to resonate with.
Yeah.
So, what is the best takeaways from the hardest thing you've ever done to give you awareness for the next time you try something a little bit more difficult?
Well, Jasmine, the honest truth is I've done a lot of really hard things. And they've all had the same kind of flavor
Mm.
that the hard part was denying my own needs and denying who I was. I mean, I'm actually thinking of I grew up with a very difficult father, and I ended up having to get a restraining order against him at the age
I'm
of 23
sorry.
in order to get him out of my life because he was very dangerous. No one up until then would stand up for me. No one would actually help me get him out of my life until a judge was kind enough to grant me the restraining order. And I was 23 years old. And as you mentioned, that's still a very young woman.
Yeah, very young.
And to be able to stand up to someone who has such a prominent presence in our
Yeah.
lives and someone who everyone else believes should just be a part of your life no matter what
Ah,
was a powerful moment in my history where the judge said to my father, sir, you believe that you have a right to a relationship with your daughter, but in fact, it is only a privilege. And today I revoke that privilege.
mm, wow, powerful
And it was
words.
a female judge. It was a woman.
Ah,
And it was the first time anybody had allowed my voice to be heard,
yeah.
really respected. And it was the first time I finally got what I knew I needed, even though the world never gave that to me. People who said they loved me never gave that to me. I finally stood up for myself and I stood up for my own needs. And that was one of the most momentous moments in history. And I think there have been other times in my life where I've fallen into the trap of compromising my needs and compromising myself. But I've always gotten myself out of that trap the moment I centered my needs and wishes. And really, that's at the heart of satisfaction.
Yeah. To truly understand what you need and want, and to be comfortable with your own self, to give yourself, as you say, grace to understand that I'm deserving of someone sticking up for me. And that judge saw that she needed to make her statement for you because when you're that young, you don't have boundaries. You have no idea what you're doing. You're like, okay, this
Well,
is a new day. I think I know everything. I know nothing.
I
Like,
also didn't have any power. I was
yeah.
truly powerless. I would say, I don't want you in my life, and then he would show up.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to even ask for when you raised on that and raised around it. So I would say the term that we don't want to use is man up to speak your truth, feminine up
Well,
to speak your truth.
yeah, and the feminine does speak truth. We as feminine, we are truth seekers. We are truth
Oh,
seekers and we are inquisitors and we are the change makers. Change happens because of us. Truth is found because of us. It all starts from listening to our own intuition and our own emotional guidance. And every time we don't or aren't allowed to, we will not be served by it.
beautiful idea. And all of us to resonate and comprehend and to know how powerful that statement is in its own, and then to appreciate it. And you have to pick up the book or find her website, The Way of the Satisfied Woman. And Alanna Kaivalya, it was a pleasure to have you today. And I'm looking forward to how many people sign up for your class because I'm there.
Awesome. I can't wait.
All right. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tranquility Magazine podcast. Please subscribe and add your questions to our Q&A. We want to give a thank you to our team for their effort in creating every episode and our content at tranquilitymagazine.com.